Hey, estate planning attorney Paul Rabalais here, and in this video we're going to talk about people who want to protect their assets from lawsuits, and we're going to talk about what is a fraudulent conveyance. Okay, the backstory here is that many people go to their estate planning attorneys and they ask those attorneys, they say something like, well, you know, Paul, how can I protect, I want to have a conversation about asset protection. Paul, how can I protect my assets, such as the real estate that I own, the bank accounts that I own, my business interests, my investments? How can I protect that and shield it from lawsuits or from potential creditors? And there could be any reason why that person is worried about that. Maybe they're worried about the potential liability from a car accident that either has already occurred, or they just maybe they have teenage drivers and they're worried about their personal liability for future car wrecks that they or their children may have. Maybe someone signed a personal guarantee on some kind of business transaction or on some other matter, and that personal guarantee makes them personally responsible to pay that debt, and maybe things are starting to go bad, so they're worried about that. Sometimes people own property, whether it's because it's more of a risk for someone getting injured on the property, perhaps because it's hunting property, or maybe there's some kind of environmental concern where there's some risk for liability. Or maybe someone's in a profession, doctor, lawyer, accountant, or some profession where the risk of liability, personal liability, is great. Or maybe somebody's just thinking, there's so many darn lawyers out there who, and those litigation lawyers, they'll sue anybody for anything, anytime. I just want to make sure I'm protected if one of those lawyers gets a hold of me. So some people, they want to transfer assets that are in their name in order to what they feel like is protect those assets. Some people want to transfer assets of theirs that are exposed to lawsuits. They want to transfer those assets either to other individuals or some type of entity in order to protect them. The problem is that judges can employ these fraudulent conveyance statutes to undo or unwind these transfers because it was determined by a judge perhaps that the transferor was attempting to defraud a legitimate creditor. So what is a fraudulent conveyance? Well, the tough answer is that there is really no black and white test. I would say, in general, transfers to frustrate potential creditors can be a fraudulent conveyance. And the fraudulent conveyance laws are designed to protect creditors from debtors who transfer their assets solely to avoid that particular debt. Let me give you a couple of examples, and then maybe you can apply your circumstances based on the examples that I give you. First, let me give you the proverbial car wreck example. So, gentleman gets in a car wreck and it seems like it's his fault, and the person that he hits are perhaps even killed or maybe even very seriously injured. So the driver who caused that accident is immediately thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to get sued. My car insurance only pays for $500,000 of damages. I'm going to get sued for millions, and they're going to take everything that I own. So here's the deal with that car wreck in general. Some people mistakenly believe that it's okay, I can go ahead and move all of these assets out of my name, either because there's no judgment against me yet, or some people say, I know I was in a wreck, but I'm okay to transfer everything out of my name because nobody's filed a lawsuit against me yet. Those are very false assumptions. So even if it's not clear that you would be liable based on the facts of the accident, removing assets and making those transfers due to your potential liability for events that have already occurred can be considered a fraudulent conveyance. Let me give you another example. Let's talk about maybe the doctor who's worried about some big malpractice claim. I would say in general, it's not considered a fraudulent conveyance to transfer assets in anticipation of a future liability, the basis of which has not yet arisen. So doctor transfers assets perhaps to a trust for her children, for fear of one day in the future being subject to some large malpractice claim. Now, once the basis for that liability occurs, you know, some medical treatment or medical procedure gone wrong, well, those transfers that took place before the basis for the liability occurred, you know, those should be kind of shielded and should be protected from those events that took place after those transfers were made. Now, again, you can apply your circumstances, but what I'm trying to get across is I've had way too many people tell me, Paul, I want to protect my assets. They haven't filed a lawsuit against me yet. Let's go ahead and do a bunch of transfers before they file the lawsuit. But something has already arisen and there may be a lawsuit filed in the future, but there is no, it's all protected because we transferred it all out of our name before a lawsuit was filed. That's not the way to handle these kinds of actions. And I will say that I find I've had a lot of, I don't know if I call them useless conversations, but, you know, I'll give you an example. A doctor friend of mine, client of mine, he called me one day. He said, Paul, I was in a little fender bender and the guy sued me. And oh my God, I've got my house. I've been working for 35 years as a dentist. I've got a couple of $1 million of investments and savings. I've got my dental practice. They're gonna wipe me clean. I need to talk to you immediately about what I can do. And I'm like, okay, it's another one of these conversations. So of course we have the conversations and we've got to get through lots of obstacles in those conversations. He's got to realize two things. One, in order to try to protect his assets, he's got to give up control over those assets for the rest of his lifetime, which he doesn't want to do. And then number two, he has to realize that these fraudulent conveyance statutes exist, and the nature or the event that caused the claim, you know, the nature of the claim, that has already taken place. So usually when they get, you know, the lawsuit against them, or even if you know, an individual gets a letter, they tend to, and I know these are strong words, but they tend to freak out. And then what happens? They panic. They call lawyers. They call others. They call other professionals. They feel like they have to kind of protect everything that they have right now. They look into it. They use up a lot of people's times, and they learn the things in this video. And then over the course of that, they kind of calm down. And what happens oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes they wind up, because their personal liability is minimal based on perhaps insurance that they have, or perhaps because they can defend themselves in a manner that their personal liability is minimal. These things, they just kind of you know, make their way through the system, and then they get resolved and everybody moves on with their lives. That doesn't happen all the time, but that's what happens, quite frankly, in my experience, most of the time. Nonetheless, it is still a concern to many. And I guess my suggestion or the moral of the story is, if this kind of potential for losing things subject to a future liability that you might have, if it's the kind of thing that keeps you awake at night, then you want to find out what your options are right now. You want to make an informed decision. Make that decision early and do what you need to do so that you're not lying awake at night worried that something might happen that causes you to be sued and you lose everything that you have. So I would do that, and then I'd do two more things. One, I would smash the like button to make sure you tell YouTube, show Paul's videos to more people. And then number two, if you haven't already subscribed and hit the notification bell, that way you won't miss anything as I keep cranking out these estate planning, educational, and informational YouTube videos. Y'all take care. Have a good day. We'll see you next time.